All right, well, first of all, thank you, SJA, for having us. I'm honored to be here, and really great group of people that they put together, great speakers and great sessions. Hopefully we can keep that up with our session here. I will tell you that Dean and I both come from the news media world, which is a little bit different, and just by way of show of hands, how many of you have people that deploy to high-risk locations or travel a lot? Lots of travelers. How many have people that deploy to emerging markets? Maybe it's for sales, things like that, places that are not that well known. Yeah, so a lot of folks here that I think this hopefully will resonate with you. Look, at the end of the day, whether it's news, media, marketing, sales, leadership, all are high touch, high mobility positions. And nowadays, if you want to keep your business really dynamic and kinetic, you have to go to the market, you have to be out there. And that includes the C-suite people that are traveling. And I know there's a heavy focus right now, particularly after that tragedy back in December with the United Healthcare CEO, Mr. Thompson, that there's a lot of focus on the C-suite. But at the end of the day, we have to protect everybody. So I guess the salient question here is that if you are sending people to high-risk or austere environments, I can tell you from our perspective at News Corp, we've seen journalists getting wrongfully, this is just in the past 2-3 years, journalists getting wrongfully detained or arrested, assaults, major protests where they've gotten rolled up into the protests. We've had fatalities, traffic fatalities, as well as just accidents causing grievous harm, bodily harm, and grave injuries. And of course the doxing and cyber attacks that we have constantly. So it's not unusual for us to see that. And it's not just in the news media world, it's every company's touched by this. So that's why I asked for the show of hands. If you've got people going somewhere in the world outside the flagpole or away from the confines of your offices, you're going to be subject to some of these things. And heck, we're subject to them in New York City or here in Chicago too. So it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is, how political or how controversial, just conducting travel briefs or preparing with orientations is really not enough in terms of duty of care. So with that preface, I'm going to ask Dean, what are your greatest concerns for your people who travel or are away from the flagpole? What do you see as the biggest concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying that this is inherently derived from the fact that they're not in our security network, we're in our HQ, in our corporate office. It's different, right? They travel, mean the security infrastructure that we built no longer exists. We have to build a new ops plan, a new contingency plan for wherever they are. And location matters. You know, it really depends where are they deployed to. So really what keeps me up at night, first and foremost, is their security and safety. You know?
And these plans that you're doing, you actually are doing them, they're bespoke for each individual traveler for where they're going, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every plan really deployed directly for that specific location, followed by a deep dive risk analysis to that specific location. So really, the reason that we really focus first on the security of safety is because we don't have that coverage in wherever we send them to. Right. This thing needs to be established from A to Z all over again. Every time each deployment is different. Doesn't matter if it's recurring, it's helpful, but every time frame, every location, every recent event, you know, crime analysis has patterns to it. So every time, even if it's recurring, we have to go over and deep dive again prior to any trip. Now, security and safety is one thing and quite obvious, but on top of it, another concern of mine is, of course, emergency preparedness and readiness. You know, 100%. How are we capable to support them on the ground? And even further than that, right? I mean, we can be well-versed, all of us, in what do we want to do and what's our emergency course of action in case of any situation on the ground, but we're not there.
Yeah.
Who else needs to be completely well-versed in our emergency procedure? It's that sole traveler. They definitely need to be well-versed in what we are planning to do, what's the recourse of action if we have to take rerouting to certain different locations because something happened in the vicinity, right? So they need to understand the lay of the land. They need to understand what needs to happen in every single situation on the ground because they've been taught that prior to the trip. All these thorough analysis and training are a big factor prior to deployment. My worst case scenario, and my most concern is robust communication.
Yeah.
How do I maintain that reliable, constant communication with the traveler, let alone monitoring and tracking?
Right.
That's because it's one thing to have everything in place, the plan, the analysis, deep dive to all the risk assessment, but if I cannot keep constant communication with him, then we're losing sight of things. And maintain constant communication, keep him safe, keep him aware, and keep each other knowledgeable what's happening on the ground and what's happening from the threat analysis from the back end.
And are you guys using any type of a follow me or tracking service or mechanism for your people that are deployed in high-risk locations?
Yeah, without getting in trouble with privacy, but no, absolutely. Yeah, certain trips, and it's case by case, definitely require and recommended us to track our travelers, right, to make sure we always have their location in hand. And those platforms are integrated. Thanks to many providers, some of them are probably here in the crowd. We have a lot of options for all-in-one shop. They really provide that threat intelligence that goes together with a platform that give you those tracking capabilities. Right. Everything is all together in one piece that helps you basically know location, know how this location impacts them, given recent events, and then, of course, relay what needs to be relayed at that given moment.
And I'm sure you see in the news media world, and those of you who don't know, I mean, journalists they're like military people or like cops. They hear the gunfire, they want to go towards it because they got to get that story.
Yeah.
And some of them are not really trained to do what they think they want to do, and they get a little spooked. We were worried that with these mechanisms, the tracking mechanisms and that, there was a lot of hubbub around, wow, they're not going to want to be tracked. They're going to turn it off the minute they get into country. And what we found is quite the opposite, is that once they see that they have that, let's call it a security blanket, they actually want more of it, to the point where we start getting calls where they're, well, I'm traveling to Mexico for vacation. Can you guys track me? So they want it. We see an appetite. Are you seeing the same thing?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a perk, right? Yeah. It's nothing against you, let alone I tell them, as soon as you get off the plane, toggle it on, and then let me start the monitoring, let me help you. Everything that we provide, it's for them. And it's part of the training that we provide them ahead of the trip. Give them that blanket that you mentioned and make them understand that this is for them, this is for the trip, and based off what I'm showing you right now, things happened before in those certain locations.
So with these things that you provide, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, how far should companies go in terms of duty of care? Like, how deep do you go into it? And does that cross over to your contingent workers, temporary workers, contract employees?
So it all goes back to phase one, right? To the deep dive of the risk assessment plan before the trip. We start from the top. It's really important to, and I've heard it before in the previous discussions, I think Peter mentioned it, but political stability. Political stability matters really to how the country, how the government function. I mean, is there civil unrest and demonstration throughout the country because the government has complications?
Potential for
violence. Democracy, potential violence. Do we cover demonstration part of that assignment? If so, there is a very potential clash here. Does this government accept foreign media? Is there any restriction for foreign media? Are the piece, and I'm very taking it personally to journalism, but is the piece that we plan to publish criticize the government in any way, right? Is there a piece about climate, for instance, that maybe the government, this country does not really fit those requirements? That's some sort of criticism that not every government will be happy to hear. Yeah. Do we want to wait with publishing that piece when plane hit the ground back in the US? This little thing that we have to consider, how stable is the government, how do they accept foreign media, and what's the situation currently on the ground based on the political stability. And
what kind of mechanism do you use to give a security rating or a risk rating for a country? Like, what are the parameters that you're trying to
Right, so one of them, of course, is political stability, and then, big one that we really have to go in is crime analysis. Yeah. And of course, those providers give us a big blanket of support that we can trace back. And I'll trace back a little bit, but when we get the story pitch, the assignment itself, we could be very lucky, and you can vouch here as well that if we get a trip assignment a month ahead, we're lucky.
Oh yeah, that's
We're
rare.
lucky.
That's very
Some
rare.
trips could be 1 week ahead of time. That's not a lot of time, but our job is definitely to deep dive to really what this location is all about. And crime analysis is a big part of it, where we want to try and find some sort of a pattern to the crime. So it's not just like recurring crimes in the vicinity, but it's also type of crimes, how far, what's their vicinity from the hotel accommodation, the meeting interviews locations, and again, of course, how often they happen. And also, all this analysis is important for us to really know if this is a place we want the traveler to be staying at, or we want a recourse and find a different location where this type of incidents are not as recurrent.
I think we do pretty much the same, and we look at security analysis or threat analysis from the prism of 4 tracks, and one is criminal. What's the criminal environment, not just in the city or location they're going to, but regionally as well, because there's spillover effects. We look at health and environmental to include, potential for natural disasters, and it doesn't matter if you have all the security in the world and the people have PPE, but there's a volcano that's about to explode, right? We look at cyber and foreign counterintelligence threat as well, which is very important, and I would encourage you, if you're not looking at that, irrespective of if you're in journalism and news media, that's a very important thing to keep an eye on. And last is the terrorist threat. And then we rate them, we try to be very simplistic. It's high, moderate, or low. So a red, yellow, or green, and make it as simple as possible. And we look at it from, dozens of different sources. If you're looking at a unilateral source, you may see that a particular location is red rated, but the other one's telling you it's not, right?
Sure. So sources are really, and try to be varied about it, are really, really important, because it's one thing to use your one-stop shop threat intelligence provider will give you really an extensive overview, but we should use stuff that we have in hand. For instance, State Department, travel advisories.
Yep.
That's a first go-to. Why not? They monitor in those locations purposely and location-based, right? They have designated offices just for that. On top of it, a very valuable, like the security industry community, is local contacts.
Yeah.
All of us, and I'm sure you as well, keep contacts locally in countries and locations where we deploy to, because it's extremely valuable. Not just language barrier or knowledge of the culture, but also they're there day by day. They know what's happening on the ground. It's not enough to get the Siren Alert app in Ukraine, but it's also to understand what's happening in the vicinity, in the news, in the local news every single day, because they're there.
Yeah.
So it's valuable.
I think it's important too that one of the things that I'm going to ask you what your opinions are, like the top 3 things security leaders can do to help protect their people, but I'm going to chime in with something that I think is uber important that I don't see enough of. And doing some security consulting aside from my day job, I see consistently with companies that you would expect that would have better planning. They do a great job of doing that pre-travel security brief, or of letting people know what PPE they need to bring or what they should or should not do, but they don't really do a whole heck of a lot on response measures. So if the balloon goes up and you have an emergency whether it's a critical injury, a medical emergency, a natural disaster, or a catastrophic system failure of some sort, they really have not stress tested to see what will they do to respond to it. I equate that a lot to what we see, those of you who travel and you see TSA, they do a great job of finding grandma's water bottle or your wife's makeup, but they don't know what the hell to do if they find a gun. They found a gun, okay, now what? Call the manager, call the supervisor. You can't afford to have that.
I agree. Thoroughly, what we're trying to do is really focus on employee training, on those travelers. Now, I'll take it into media and then out of media to have everyone's attention, but in journalism and reporters, we have a specific training course. It's called HEFA training,
right.
Hostile Environment and First Aid. This is a designated course that really give them the best situational awareness to a high-risk zone location, and now, of course, to take care of themselves while in the field. We don't expect them to be doctors, but at least if there is, God forbid, an emergency, they'll be able to do those first few steps to keep themselves alive and safe until they gotta get to some sort of medical treatment. But on top of it, any other traveler we should definitely try and focus more on training, like you mentioned. Yeah. So training would be the situational awareness factor. a little more refreshers on certain countries and their local laws and natural disasters, really to understand what's the set of expectations that you have before deployment. Those refreshers can just give you a head start.
I would also include that the incident management business continuity team, when you're working on exercising, you should have exercises that relate to how do you respond to a person who's significantly injured. And there's companies out there that provide those services for medevac, et cetera. But if you're in an austere environment, Ukraine, for example, and you've got to get somebody back to good medical support, that's a challenge. It is a challenge. And there are a lot of companies will pay lip service and say, oh, we could do it. But then there's that little fine print that says, I can't do it in a combat environment if combat is actively going on. So you need to do your homework, work with your incident management business continuity teams, war game it out and say, what if? What if we can't get that person out? Well, by God, you still have a duty of care responsibility. And by the way, I might add that in terms of safety, it's not just for journalists, in terms of safety, in the UK and in Australia, you could be held criminally liable if you don't provide the service. So you got to really do your homework on duty of care and make damn sure that you know how you can get that person the help that they need if they're in a high-risk area, right?
And to continue in that, you mentioned conditional workers.
Yeah.
And that's a big, big factor as far as insurance goes and coverage. Now, of course, when we hire and engage with conditional workers to certain assignments, which we do, there is a reason to it, right? It could be a certain set of skills that they have that is just more immediate and accessible to utilize.
Right.
They have better knowledge in certain countries, certain locations that we just better off deploy them rather than an actual employee from the company.
Right.
But with that comes a challenge where they're not in our security blanket, and there is some sort of a process of establishing a relationship with them.
Yeah.
The relationship would be obviously get to know them. We need to know who we're deploying, who we're going to work with.
Because a lot of times they're hired locally and we never get to see them. We don't know who they really are.
We don't. So those calls are vital to really get together and understand the assignment, understand their plans. And those people have routine work. They used to do certain things. We're not necessarily always going to agree with their routine, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're comfortable with what they're going to do because they're now hired by us, they're employed by us. Another factor and challenge is, of course, they're not, a time employee or whatever other company. They don't have that insurance coverage, right? We have not just an ethical or legal obligation, but we also have that sense of duty of care to make sure they are covered all around, not just with our security systems and support, but also to make sure before they engage in an assignment for us in a certain location or high risk for that purpose, they also have complete coverage, travel and medical insurance, while they're deployed.
You know what, Dean, and there's an added dimension to that I think everybody should know, and that anecdotally I could speak to it from our company and from news media. We tend to hire what we call stringers or local hires that help us. They're helpers that work for us on the ground. And I think most companies, you have some form of conditional worker that's helping you on the ground that's a local national. The challenge with that in certain countries is that local national, because they are a local national, are actually more vulnerable than your foreign national is. So you have to do your homework. When you're doing your homework and looking at what the threat profile looks like, if there have been unlawful detentions, Russia, Turkey, your people will be more vulnerable than the ones that live there and are the passport holders. So it's something that you really got to keep an eye on, right?
I agree. Also, I think it's mainly from the fact that they're working for foreign media.
Exactly. Yeah. You're more vulnerable.
Yeah. The actual country, of course, look at it as sort of betrayal or looking at the wrong way, where it should be some sort of just an extension of our services.
They default to thinking it's espionage or public safety risk.
Very true.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you then, if you had to identify the top 3 things as a security leader you need to do to better secure your people that are traveling or going out to austere environments, what would those be?
Well, I'll start, like we said, the first and foremost, a comprehensive risk assessment of the trip. Mm-hmm. Take as much time as you can when you have it, to really go into details about the trip from the pitch phase, get to know what the assignment is, the story, where those interviews are, who you're going to be talking to, learn about the travel itself, and why is even going there. Is it a necessary trip or not, right? Let's start there. After we really wrap up that idea, we need to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities in the trip. If it's really a necessary trip, we're going to go into deep dive to the crime analysis, to the political stability, to natural disaster, to terrorism threat, health risks, ES vaccinations, thorough deep dive to the entire process upon deployment, infrastructure, transportation, secure transportation, vetted accommodation. All that goes into prior to the trip risk assessment, you know? And then on top of it, of course, and I'm always going to be a big believer of robust communication.
Yes,
I'm never going to let that go because, you know, when it's a remote work, we must maintain a good line. So, you know, it could be from GPS tracking to messaging encrypted apps, but it also be a sat phone.
Would you guys do like an ISO prep plan for the person where
Yeah.
you have all their information ahead of time?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, isolation prep is something the government does quite a bit, and we do that. We'll have a packet that's retained by us and by HR, secretly put aside, that's got all the person's medical, if there's any medical meds that they're on, copies of their passports, copies of their photographs, family photographs, and we have them come up with a code word. And again, this is all sealed and privately kept that way. If there's a situation that they're detained or held hostage or something, we already have what we need on them. So you don't want to be scrambling for that at the last minute, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, the last piece of the puzzle, of course, is robust employee training.
Absolutely.
Make sure they're ready to go.
Yeah. Plan, inspect, rehearse, and get them ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Dean, thank you so much. This was great. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, we'll be out in the audience who can answer.
Thank you.